Hello everyone, welcome to the course Basic Cognitive Processes. I am Ark Verma from IIT Kanpur. Now we have been talking about attention since the last lecture, and if you remember what I was telling in the last lecture was this very interesting experiment or a very interesting finding that Colin Cherry found out, and this finding was referred to as the cocktail party effect. So it often happens, just to give you a brief recap, it would often happen in public gathering like in parties or restaurants or in a busy classroom, that you're talking to somebody or engaged in this particular conversation, but there's still some other conversations going around, and suddenly someone in those other conversations wherein you're not really involved and they are probably 10-50 meters away from you, somebody mentions your name, you quickly get oriented towards that particular conversation. You do notice something that somebody took your name, maybe even though that person is not really talking to you, is talking to somebody else and is sitting, say for example 20 meters away from you. It does happen. Now why is this happening? You were engrossed in a particular conversation, you were attending to the person's got oriented to your name in the other conversation. There are two important things here. First is that particular conversation is also in some sense probably being processed in your head so that you could notice that. The second is not any other information you might so distinctly remember, but you remembered that your name was taken. So information that is relevant to you was in some way prioritized and had more attention so that you quickly looked to it. So you have to look at the attentional system in such a way that it is doing at least two things. It is prioritizing, and information relevant to you is probably at a much higher priority than any other kind of information. And also the second thing is that other kinds of information are also being processed even though they are not actively engaged in while you are listening to that or processing that. So this is something which is important, and in today's lecture we will be talking about selective attention, different theories of selective attention, and we will be talking about those theories with reference to Colin Cherry's work. Okay, so Colin Cherry observed that cocktail parties are often settings wherein selective attention is very salient. See, there is a lot of hustle and bustle, there is a lot of things going on, too many people are talking. So you have to really keep up your selective attention game at the best so that you can at least listen to somebody. If you are, say for example in fairs or in very busy crowded malls, obviously sometimes to even attend to the person walking next to you becomes difficult. So your selective attention is working overtime to help you at least understand one conversation that you are part of. Okay, so yeah, this is just a meme I picked up from the internet. Let us now talk about, so Cherry was interested in studying selective attention. Cherry he actually studied selective attention in a very carefully controlled experimental setting, and he used a task which is referred to as shadowing. What happens is that one is listening to different kinds of messages. So Cherry presented a separate message to both the ears. So one ear receives another message, the other ear receives a different kind of message. This important task of giving two different kinds of messages, two different kinds of signals, or even sometimes to same kind of signal to both the ears, depending on what your experimental design is called the dichotic listening task. So this presentation was called dichotic presentation, where you are presenting a separate message to each ear. And he asked these participants, he asked these subjects of his experiment to repeat back only one of the messages, and as soon as possible after hearing it. Cherry's participants, so this is the setup basically, again something borrowed from, the demonstration is borrowed from Sternberg and Sternberg. So you can see that this lady is getting two different kinds of messages in the two ears. So in one ear is she is hearing in the picnic basket she had peanut butter sandwiches and chocolate brownies, in the other ear she is hearing the cat suddenly started to. So you see these two messages qualitatively different as well, and she is shadowing, say from the shadowed ear she is repeating that message out. These participants generally were quite successful in shadowing distinct messages in these dichotic listening tasks, although such shadowing required significant amount of concentration. If you kind of pick up two phones and start talking with two people at the same time, you will find that it's so confusing, it's so difficult to even listen to what these two people are saying, leave alone the repeating part. These participants, however, were also able to notice physical or sensory changes in the unattended message as well. So, you might think that all the concentration is spent in just shadowing one of the ears and repeating that, but Cherry noticed that these participants were actually noticing if there were any physical or sensory changes made in the unattended message. Remember, this is not the shadowed ear. When the message, the unattended message that is, was changed to a tone, if there was just a beep and here the message in the picnic basket is playing, or say for example here the cat was suddenly being said by a male and suddenly now it is being said by a female, they also would notice it. Now, however, they did not really notice the semantic changes in the unattended message. If the meaning would change, they will not notice that. They also failed to notice even when the unattended message was shifted from German to English or was started to play backward, those kind of things they did not really notice. So, they are doing some analysis with the message in the unattended ear, but they are not really doing this analysis to a semantic level wherein you are kind of really understanding that as well. That is where probably the resource limitation would come in. Now, conversely, about 1/3 of these people, when their name was presented during this kind of situation, shifted their attention to their name. So, even if in the unattended ear their name was presented, they would quickly grab it and quickly attend it. Now, some researchers that have noticed that there's people who do hear their name even in the unattended message wherein a concentrated task is going on in the shadowed ear may have what is called limited working memory capacity and thus are easily distracted, have lower amounts of concentration there. So, your working memory capacity just kind of gets filled up and then you kind of are very distracted towards all the other things that you're hearing. Now, if you kind of try and analyze this, how this is happening, what are the findings of this experiment and how you can make sense of them, 3 factors will help you to understand it. There will be 3 factors that will help a person to selectively attend the target speaker if say for example you are caught in a busy restaurant or those kind of settings. Now, distinctive sensory characteristics of the target speaker, say for example somebody has a very peculiar voice, you must have heard everybody make fun of Sachin Tendulkar's voice. So, if there is a distinctive characteristic of that particular voice, you will probably attend it better. The second is the sound intensity. If the person speaks very loudly versus if they speaks very slowly, it becomes that difficult. If the person speaks rather loudly, you will certainly that will grab your attention and you will listen to that. The third is the location of the sound. If it's coming very close to you, it's coming from slightly further away from you. Sometimes you would have seen that people find it difficult to hear each other and then they will call the person they are talking to and come and sit next to me and then they will have the conversation. So, these are the 3 sources, 3 features of the target person's voice that might help you to concentrate on them better. Now, let us talk about theories of selective attention. Now, there will be few theories we will be talking about. These theories can be grouped into filter theories and bottleneck theories. Very broadly speaking, a filter theory basically says that there is a filter which blocks some of the information going through and thereby selects only a part of the total information to pass through the next stage. A bottleneck basically says that a bottleneck is going to slow down the information passing through, though all the information will pass. So, this is the distinction between filter theories of attention and bottleneck theories of attention. Just to repeat, a filter theory is saying that some of the information will will be blocked from going through and only a part of this total information will pass. So, something that you have not selected kind of stays outside the perceptual thing. The second theory says that everything will pass, but there will be a bottleneck. So, there will be some kind of a capacity limitation of handling information. So, these are the 2 things you have to remember. Now, 2 questions one can ask, say for example, if there is a filter being applied, whether there is a distinct filter for all kinds of incoming information. So, auditory information there is other filter, visual information there is other filter, does that happen this way? The second is where in this entire processing the filter will be put. Will it be put at the initial at the most early stage that all the information is coming, there is passing through filter, only some information really get through, get past you and get past your brain where you understand it. Or you put the information put the filter much later so that all the information coming in get processed to some particular stage, but wherever the most relevant and important stage is, there the filter is, and so that you are kind of just processing the most processing happens only for a limited set of information, while basic process probably apply to all the other information that are coming. So these are the two kind of questions you can ask if you're talking about these filter theories. One of the very important filter theories is Donald Broadbent's theory. Donald Broadbent basically said that we are filtering information right after we notice it at the sensory level. So it's an early filter kind of a theory. So we are kind of filtering out information at the sensory level itself. Multiple channels of sensory input reach an attentional filter. Those channels can be distinguished by their characteristics like loudness, pitch or accent. Say for example, there are multiple people speaking in a busy room and you're kind of just prioritizing, or each of them is salient in one way or the other by the incoming information. Now the filter permits only one channel of sensory information to proceed and reach the process of perception. We thereby after this we will assign meaning to our sensations. Okay, so the filter has to basically select from these different kinds of information, but it will basically really permit only one of the pieces of information to pass through this filter, and that is the one which you will be able to analyze completely and assign meaning to. Other stimuli that you have left out will be filtered out at the sensory level itself, and it will never reach to the level of perception. Okay. If you remember from the sensation and perception class, sensation is just the analysis of incoming information, perception is about assigning meaning to that, evaluating whether you know this information or not, those kind of things. Now Broadbent's theory was supported by Colin Cherry's findings that sensory information may sometimes be noticed by an unattended ear if it does not have to, and even if it does not have to be processed elaborately. Say for example, if the voice was shifting from towards a tone, or the male voice was being converted to female voice, it was still being attended. But information requiring higher perceptual processing, say for example knowing the language of the message, that will happen even if this is not attended to. So there is this distinction that is happening. Another model that we can talk about is the selective filter model. Now Murray basically found out that even when participants are ignoring most of the other higher level aspects of unattended message, they do frequently recognize their names in an unattended ear. So the filter is not really that hard, it's not really that strict in that sense, and information that is like things like your name do pass on. He suggested that the reason for this effect is that the messages that are of high importance to a person may anyways break through the filter of selective attention. So if say for example somebody says your name, somebody is talking about people from your family, somebody is talking about something that you are very interested in, say for example a conversation about cricket, that might still be relevant to you in a special way, and you might still be it might still grab your attention. Now to modify Broadbent's metaphor, in light of these findings, what one could say that according to Murray, the selective filter blocks out most of the information at the sensory level, but some personally relevant information still passes off. So the filter is not really a very strict filter and keeps everything out and not getting them processed, but everything that is relevant to you, something that you really like, some conversation about cricket or football or whatever you are interested in, will still be heard. Imagine yourself traveling in a metro and some people is talking about your favorite players, you might still attend that, even though you are not really part of that conversation, you are busy in doing something else. Now the third model that we can talk about, another different kind of model, is called the attenuation model. Now Treisman tried to explore why are these unattended messages passing through the filter, and she kind of tried to explore this by doing certain kinds of experiments. Now she had participants shadowing these coherent messages, and at some point what happened was that she switched the remainder of the message to unattended ear. So what is happening is again the dichotic presentation is happening, some information is coming in the left ear, some information is present in the right ear. Now what she is doing is that whatever information is playing in the attended ear, the shadowed ear that is, at some point in time that information from the shadowed ear switches to the unshadowed or the unattended ear. Now what happened in this scenario? Some participants picked up the first few words of the message that they had been shadowing in the unattended ear as well. So there were some processing happening in the unattended ear as well. So they somehow must have been able to process whatever is going on in the unattended ear, even though they are shadowing this particular ear. Moreover, it was found that if the unattended message was identical to the attended one, all the participants will notice it. So, they notice even if one of the messages was slightly out of the temporal synchronization. Say for example, you are talking to two people on phone, or say for example, sometimes your headphones, they get out of sync, those kind of things can happen, and that kind of differences people do notice. Now, Treisman also observed that if there were some very fluently bilingual participants in the same kind of setup that I was talking about, they will notice if the messages in the unattended ear was translated version of the attended one. Say for example, if I am talking about a particular phenomena here in English and a translation of this description in Hindi here, I might still be able to follow what is going on in say attended ear. So, unattended ear, that is. So, this is also happening. So, some kind of semantic processing must be happening here as well. Now, these findings that Treisman found out suggested that at least some information from the unattended ear is also being analyzed. It is not only being evaluated at the sensory level, but it is analyzed at a higher level as well. Now, Treisman, account for all of these findings, proposed a theory of selective attention that involves a slightly later filtering mechanism. Instead of blocking the stimuli out, the filter is merely weakening the strength of the stimuli other than the target stimulus. So, everything else is just getting slightly weakened and the filter is applied much later. So, when the stimuli reaches, we are analyzing them at a low level for target properties like loudness, pitch, etc. But if the stimuli possess those target properties, we pass the signal on to the next stage. If they do not possess these kind of properties, then a very weakened version of these still gets passed on to whatever selection criteria you have given to this filter. It will search for that selection criteria matching. If something matches, it is directly sent to the next stage. If it does not match, it is weakened and still sent to the next stage. Now, in the next step, we perceptually analyzing the meaning, we are perceptually analyzing the meaning of the stimuli and their relevance to us, so that even a message from the unattended ear, which is supposedly weaker now and is irrelevant to us, can come into awareness and influence actions if, say for example, it has some meaning for us. Even if I hear a faint version of my name in the unattended ear, I am still going to attend it. Even if this one is a translation of whatever is going on in the attended ear, I will listen to it. Here you can see the comparison of Broadbent's and Treisman's model. You will notice that, say for example, while Broadbent is placing the filter, selective filter, just after the sensory register, Treisman is basically doing some kind of attenuation control. So, there are two taps. Okay, one, there is a direct capacity tap and the other is kind of limited capacity thing. So, again, this is metaphorical comparison of what the models of attention proposed by Broadbent and Treisman are saying. Again, very important theories have been very important in cognitive psychology. Now, even later filter model has been proposed, and Deutsch and Deutsch developed a model in which the location of filter is even later. They suggested that the stimuli are filtered out after they have been analyzed for both their physical properties and their meaning. So, they are saying, Deutsch and Deutsch are saying that no, it is not like that we will not analyze the meaning of the unattended information, we will do that as well, and only after that we will throw it away. So, this late filtering would allow people to recognize information attending the unattended ear, information presented in the unattended ear as well. For example, they might recognize the sound of their own names or a translation of the unattended version. This is what Deutsch and Deutsch were saying. They are saying that the selective filter is applied even after the perceptual processing has happened. Now, you can see how these three models differ from each other as to where this filter has been applied. Ulrich Neisser, he was going through all of these kind of models and he wanted to synthesize the early filter and the late filter models. So, he proposed that there are two processes that govern selective attention. First is the pre-attentive process. These automatic processes are rapid and they are occurring in parallel, and they can be used to notice only physical and sensory characteristics of the unattended message, but they do not discern meaning. So, a very low level analysis of the unattended message is happening. The second process happens is the attentive or the controlled process. These occur slightly later and they are executed serially. So, they happen one after the other. They consume time and attentional resources such as working memory. Now these kind of processes, the second kind of process, can be used as cues to observe the relationship among these features and synthesize fragments into mental representations of a particular object. So once you are doing this second kind of processing on the unattended message, you might be able to discern whether it has some relevance or meaning for you or not, and if it does not have, you throw it out. If it does have, it grabs your attention. Now, this two-step model basically could seriously account for Cherry's and Morey's and Treisman's data. Also, this model has been found to nicely incorporate aspects of Treisman's signal attenuation theory and her feature integration theory. Also, according to Treisman, discrete processes for feature detection and feature integration occur during searches, which also are accounted for by this particular model. Let us come to the neuroscience of selective attention. Let us talk a little bit about that. Now, Hilliard and colleague basically conducted a groundbreaking study, and they exposed participants to two streams of tones, one in each ear. Participants were asked to detect occasionally occurring target stimuli. When the target stimuli occurred in the attended ear, the first negative component of ERP was larger than when the target occurred in the second ear, the unattended ear. The first negative ERP component is the N1 wave, okay, which happens around after 90 milliseconds. The researchers hypothesized that the N1 wave was a result of the enhancement of the target stimulus because it is prioritized, enhanced. At the same time, there was a suppression of the other stimuli, which were the distractors. This result is consistent with filter theories of attention, and later theories like ones by Waldorf in 1993 found an even earlier reaction to target stimulus in the form of a positive wave that occurs about 20 to 50 milliseconds after the onset of the target. Now, this wave originates in what is called the Heschel's gyrus, the auditory cortex, and similar findings have also been reported for visual attention. So, if a target stimulus is appearing even in an unattended region of the visual field, the occipital P1, the P1 that is happening in the occipital cortex, is larger than when the target appears in the unattended. So, you are seeing that there are different brain responses to stimuli coming in the attended and unattended fields, and also depending on how much you want to enhance or attenuate that kind of information. Now, this is all for today's. We have talked about selective attention, we have talked about the different kinds of theories that have talked about selective attention. We saw that a very prominent theory of selective attention is the filter model. We have talked about for the fact that there were let us say the site of the filter is very important. We saw that Broadbent is saying that the filter model should be applied much earlier, just after the sensory analysis of everything that is coming in. We saw that Treisman was saying that maybe the filter is not really weak, putting everything out, it is just weakening this information. So, it is a limited capacity kind of a thing, it is a bottleneck kind of a thing, and it is still letting everything pass, but the one with higher priority passes faster and more directly, the one with a slightly lower priority passes in a more slower fashion. It just gets weakened even though it gets analyzed as well. We saw that there was this later model by Deutsch and Deutsch, which says sensory processing has happened, perceptual processing has happened, and only then the filter is applied. So, you have seen that there are consequences in terms of many mental processes as to which kind of filtering or selection mechanism that you are using in attention, and there are also consequences for wherein the entire processing you are putting this filter, you are applying this particular filter. A more interesting part we saw towards the end of this lecture was by Neisser, when he said that let us kind of compile all of these three kinds of models and then see what kind of a model, what kind of an integrated model one can come up with, and his data, the experiments that he did could account for a lot of findings which each of these separate models on their own could not. So, this was all about selective attention. In the next class we will talk about divided attention. Thank you.